My name is Chris Matern. I'm the general manager for the Uinta Brewing Brewhouse Pub and Retail Store. Utah has a long storied history. So pioneers came across from Illinois into the Salt Lake Valley in 1847. The first breweries opened up in Utah in 1850. The first commercial brewery opened up in Salt Lake in 1856. So Utah's been brewing beer a long time. In fact, in the early 1900s, one of the largest breweries outside of the Midwest was located here in Utah. It's producing over 100,000 barrels of beer a year, and that's in the early 1900s, pre-Prohibition. That was actually right about 10 minutes from where we're currently sitting. And then, of course, Prohibition happened. So 1911 and 1917, the Utah state legislature tried to make Utah a completely dry state. Both times it was passed to the legislature, it was vetoed by the then current Utah governor. It was a Republican at a time, who didn't want the rest of the country to think that the LDS population in Utah was pushed further away from the rest of the United States. So he vetoed Utah's action in going to Prohibition prior to the federal legislation. So in 1919, legislation was enacted federally that made it in the 18th Amendment so the different states could enact Prohibition. It made it illegal to manufacture and possess alcohol in the United States. 1933, Utah decided that it didn't really make a lot of sense the way it was written, and they had a lot of money to gain from taxes. In fact, FDR had estimated that after the rise of the U.S. after the Great Depression, we could make $245 million a year in taxable money based off of the sale of liquor. And then Utah saw an increase in bootlegging and illegal activity, so they thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So in 1933, the Utah state legislature enacted a series of laws. It made Utah what we call a control state. All spirits sold in the state of Utah are handled by the state of Utah. So if you want to buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, Jameson, anything like that, you have to go to a Utah state-owned liquor store. There's no privately owned liquor stores in Utah. It's against the law. And then they enacted that all draft beer has to be 3.2% alcohol by weight or 4% alcohol by volume. 1933, that law was enacted. 1935 is when the first state of Utah liquor stores opened up, and it's been that way ever since. So we're looking at 86 years, almost 90 years. The state of Utah has only sold spirits and beer above 3.2% alcohol by weight through state-run liquor stores. That existed until 2019, November 1st. We finally got an extra 1%. So on November 1st, the state of Utah legislature enacted so we could increase the ABV of beer to 5% alcohol by volume, just 4% by weight. So it took 86 years and we got 1 extra percent. What that allowed us brewers to do is produce high, what we call heavy beer or full volume versions of some of our favorite styles, pale ales, hazy IPAs, brown ales, Hefeweizens, and all of that sort of stuff. We could finally produce those and get those to market and get them on draft and not sold just in liquor stores. We could go to just your basic grocery store and buy 5% beer finally. Part of when they enacted this legislation, they actually put a subcommittee connected to it that will meet periodically to discuss the impacts, because a lot of what they were afraid of is Utah was the first state to adjust DUI from 0.10% to 0.08%. Utah has been the first state to move from 0.08% to 0.05%. It's technically DUI in the state of Utah. So what they want to see is there an increase in public intoxication? Is there an increase in police calls to bars and establishments like mine? Is there an increase in DUIs and stuff like that? So they have a committee who's there to analyze that, but they're also looking at the potential tax impact, because they did up the excise taxes on per barrels of beer sold. So now we as a brewery have to pay more per barrel sold to the state of Utah. And then the state's making less money because beer they used to only sell to the liquor store, they don't sell anymore. So they had to bring in more beer from out of state at higher prices. So I think, honestly, they're going to up it again. I don't think it'll take 86 years. I don't think we're going to wait till 2105 to get 6% beer on draft. I think give it a year or two, they're going to see the market's going to normalize itself. DUIs aren't going to suddenly increase. Public intox isn't going to suddenly increase because so many proprietors are responsible beer servers and beer owners. We're not here serving people to get intoxicated. We're here to enjoy a beer with our friends. And so I think you give it a year or two, I could see that limit being pushed up to 6%, hopefully 7%. Will it ever go above that in Utah? I doubt it. But at 7%, you can make pretty much any beer on style, save for imperial stouts, double IPAs, oud bruins, and some of the barrel-aged stuff. But that gives you full reign of basically 150 styles of beer. I think absolutely. Anything that's a combination of science and passion. What I've seen is there's not a wrong way to get into our industry. I have a lot of people ask me, how do you become a brewer? How do you take something that you're passionate about and make it a career? And it's definitely not a get rich quick scheme. It's a lot of long hours, it's a lot of learning from the people before you, but much like the best stories of our times were passed down vocally before we were able to write them down, the best beer recipes, the best beer knowledge has been passed down person to person to person. Sure, I've studied beer, and I've studied beer on a college level, and I've taken coursework on it. I've taken coursework on cytomology and fermentation sciences, but I've also sat down and shared a pint of beer with someone who's been brewing it for 40 years. And to hear their take on it, hear their take on the style and the passion that they bring into it, that's as much art as music. That's as much art as anything else we have.